Joe Rogan becomes the latest celebrity to blast Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds.
Blake Lively, talk about ruin your reputation, and Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, they up. Ryan's trying to get out of it now. He's trying to get out of the lawsuit, and they're like, you were a key part of this.
Joe Rogan just said what everyone else has been thinking. And Blake Lively, she's not ready for what's coming. In a brutal podcast takedown, Rogan exposed Hollywood's fake feminists, celebrities who preach empowerment on stage, but control, bully, and silence women off camera. And the second that clip hit the internet, fans immediately pointed to one name, Blake Lively. And once you see what she's done over the years, you'll understand exactly why. Joe Rogan didn't need to say her name. The message was clear. There are women in Hollywood who act like they're empowering other women, but behind the scenes, they're just as manipulative and power hungry as the men they call out. And fans knew exactly who he meant, because Blake Lively has built an empire on girl power, mom content, and curated feminism. A polished, picture-perfect version of empowerment that looks great on Instagram and sells well to brands. But behind the scenes, allegations suggest a very different reality, a pattern of clout-driven friendships, strategic brand building, and a habit of pushing other women out of the spotlight the second they're no longer useful. People remember when she positioned herself as Taylor Swift's soul sister, constantly name-dropping her in interviews, only to later use that same friendship as PR leverage when promoting It Ends With Us, falsely implying Taylor was involved in the project. They remember the glowing support all women speeches, while refusing to speak out about working with Woody Allen, or the kindness first interviews that came just weeks after she was accused of bullying and isolating castmates on set. It's not one moment, it's a pattern, and now that her lawsuit with Justin Baldoni is unraveling, with alleged receipts showing she lied about casting, took over production, and weaponized feminism to control the media narrative, that carefully built mask is slipping. Because Rogan wasn't just calling out Hollywood women, he was calling out the Blake Lively brand. And this time, the backlash isn't coming from tabloids, it's coming from people who feel like they were manipulated into believing she stood for something she never truly practiced. But this wasn't Blake's first red flag. The cracks started long before that. In 2012, Blake and Ryan Reynolds got married at Boone Hall, a plantation where enslaved people were once forced to live and work. She called it romantic. She posted vintage table settings and sun-soaked floral centerpieces. The entire aesthetic, Southern Belle nostalgia, without a single acknowledgement of the generational trauma tied to that land. The backlash was immediate and deserved. Critics called it tone-deaf, offensive, and performative, especially coming from someone who branded herself as socially aware and empowering to all women. But instead of acknowledging the harm, she waited 8 years to apologize. 8, and even then, the apology came quietly, buried in a People magazine interview with no meaningful follow-up or direct acknowledgement of what she truly participated in. Even more confusing, just 2 years after that wedding, she launched her lifestyle brand Preserve, modeled after Goop, but laced with antebellum themes. Lace doilies, Civil War era aesthetics, faded filters, reclaimed wood, everything except historical context. The brand featured articles about Southern hospitality, slow living, and curated charm, without once acknowledging the very real, violent history tied to that aesthetic. And through it all, Blake was still preaching empowerment, still being invited to feminist panels, still making inspirational speeches about using her voice. So the question becomes, was this ever about women's rights, or was it about brand identity? Because when you treat oppression as a backdrop and history as decor, that's not feminism. That's privilege with a rebrand. But it didn't stop there, because Blake defended someone even more controversial next. In 2016, Blake starred in Cafe Society, directed by Woody Allen. He had a time when renewed allegations of abuse from Dylan Farrow were dominating headlines. Actors were distancing themselves. Public pressure was growing. The conversation around accountability in Hollywood was shifting. But Blake? She didn't just accept the role, she praised him. He's empowering to women, she said. He's very in touch with the female experience. That quote echoed across the internet like a slap in the face, especially to survivors, advocates, and fans who had believed Blake was on the right side of history. She had spoken about supporting women's voices, about wanting to raise her daughters in a world free from abuse. But when it came time to make a choice between ethics and opportunity, she chose power, prestige, a paycheck. Even as Dylan Farrow publicly called out actors for ignoring her voice, Blake stayed silent. She didn't walk back her comments. She didn't clarify her position. She stood by it, proudly, repeatedly. For someone who speaks so often about being a mother and a woman in the public eye, her silence here was deafening. How do you preach female empowerment while lifting up a man accused of violating it? Because when the moment came to prove her values meant more than her career, Blake made her choice, and it wouldn't be the last time she chose power over principle. Multiple cast insiders have confirmed that during her time on Gossip Girl, Blake allegedly turned the entire set against co-star Penn Badgley after their off-screen relationship ended. What started as an amicable breakup reportedly turned toxic when Blake, still holding the spotlight as Serena van der Woodsen, allegedly made it socially uncomfortable for Penn behind the scenes. One production assistant even claimed that crew members were discouraged from chatting with him between takes if Blake was nearby. But it didn't stop there. She also had a long-running Cold War-style feud with co-star Leighton Meester, who played Blair Waldorf. Sources say Blake saw Leighton as competition, not just on screen, but in public perception. According to reports from writers' room staff, Blake allegedly pressured producers to minimize Blair-centric storylines in the final seasons, insisting that the show should focus more on Serena's arc, despite fans overwhelmingly favoring Blair. Some even believe that's why Blair's final character development felt rushed and underwritten, a casualty of off-screen politics. All the while, Blake kept doing interviews about female friendship, empowering her co-stars, and how the set felt like a sisterhood. But behind the camera, she allegedly isolated, bullied, and manipulated her way to center stage. It's two completely different personas, so the question becomes, which Blake is real? The polished feminist the media sees, or the one insiders whisper about behind closed doors? Because the woman Justin Baldoni worked with, the one accused of hijacking his film and silencing dissent, sounds a lot like that one. Reports from the set of It Ends With Us claim Blake Lively took control of the entire production. From casting to story changes, right down to the press narrative. Multiple insiders say she came in under the pretense of collaboration, but quickly began asserting creative control, often overriding director Justin Baldoni's vision. Sources from within the production say she demanded script changes, restructured emotional arcs, and even rewrote key scenes without studio approval, all to tailor the film more toward her personal brand and relatability. One of the most damaging claims? Blake allegedly told producers and press reps that Taylor Swift was involved, hinting she had contributed to the soundtrack or was connected to promotion, a move that reportedly helped secure final budget approval. But when Taylor's team caught wind of this, they immediately distanced, and Blake's claims quietly disappeared. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni, the original director and one of the main forces behind getting the film greenlit, was pushed aside. He was left with a film that no longer reflected his vision, and a team that had allegedly been reshuffled to serve Blake's priorities. And when he finally pushed back, Blake responded with a legal counterstrike, filing a lawsuit claiming harassment, reputation harm, and career sabotage. But fans and insiders alike are questioning the sincerity of that move. Was it about justice, or was it about control? Because this isn't empowerment. This is opportunistic feminism, the kind Joe Rogan called out, the kind that says support women unless those women threaten your spotlight. And when you look at Blake's public image versus her private actions, it gets even worse. Blake posts about motherhood, clean beauty, and being a girl's girl. Her feed is filled with pastel filters, empowerment quotes, and smiling selfies with her daughters. The image of a woman who champions kindness, supports women, and uplifts others. But her actions say otherwise, because behind that perfectly curated feed is a growing trail of incidents that tell a different story. She's accused of stalking and harassing a female hotel guest in Texas, a woman named Caitlin Cooper who was simply staying at the same boutique hotel Blake checked into. According to sources, Blake allegedly stared her down, took out her phone, zoomed in on her license plate, and then called security, all while Caitlin did nothing but unpack her bags. But it didn't stop there. Reports say Blake's PR team monitored Caitlin's social media, with staff members viewing her stories, sending internal requests to access guest info, and quietly trying to keep tabs on her movements. Caitlin, who's now reportedly in contact with legal teams tied to the Justin Baldoni lawsuit, hasn't gone public in full detail yet, but she's He's dropping hints online and they're getting attention. And here's the contradiction that fans can't ignore. Blake claims to support women, but when they make her uncomfortable, when they don't fit the script, or when they simply exist in her space, she allegedly targets them. That's not empowerment, that's control. And now even her silence is raising eyebrows. Blake hasn't addressed the Rogan call-out. She hasn't acknowledged her lawsuit backlash. She hasn't said a word about her resurfaced interviews, her Gossip Girl behavior, or the Magnolia Hotel incident. She just keeps posting recipes and selfies, family photos, skincare tips, dinner parties. But behind the scenes, her PR team is in full crisis mode. According to insider reports, several brand partners have paused future collaborations, waiting to see how the legal fallout plays out. One fashion label has already pulled scheduled content. Another has scrubbed Blake's name from upcoming campaigns. Even fan pages, once fiercely loyal, are starting to go private or disable comments entirely, trying to avoid being dragged into the growing backlash. Influencers who once aligned themselves with Blake's clean aesthetic are quietly stepping away, opting not to repost or tag her anymore. Because when someone like Joe Rogan, with a platform of millions, calls you out directly on air, it's not just a viral moment, it's a signal. It tells the public that the illusion is cracking, and no amount of aesthetic Instagram content can clean up what's coming next. And here's the thing, this is just the beginning. Rogan might have lit the match, but now Candace Owens is circling. Megyn Kelly already went after her. Even Leighton Meester and other Gossip Girl cast members have stayed eerily silent, and that silence speaks volumes. Because the question isn't if Blake's narrative will collapse, it's how fast and how public it's going to happen. And when the next podcast clip drops, or the next co-star speaks out, Blake Lively may not have a brand left to protect.